Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Dr. Pallavi Jha and I am from the Department of English and Foreign Languages, Tezpur University. I am here to talk to you about the module on the superhero. This module is roughly divided into an introduction, defining the idea of the superhero, superhero and the comic book, conclusion, bibliography and suggested reading, model questions, and has illustrations. The idea of hero and hero worship has always existed in human civilization. From the time of human socialization, heroes with unbelievable strength, both physical and mental, have formed a crucial part of human lore. These characters with superpowers form an indelible part of our epics, legends, folktales, and literature. As Angela Nadalianis writes, I quote, "Heroic narratives have a history that's as old as that of the establishment of human socialization. This major cultural construct began before Hercules slew the Nemean lion with his bare hands, or Odin killed the giant Ymir, and often reflects the social need for extraordinary action. Hero myths contain universal elements and have a continued presence in cultural memory. Yet, they are dynamic beings who shift and metamorphose to accommodate themselves to specific eras and historic cultural contexts." I end my quote. Heroes are therefore culture-specific and era-specific and are usually beings that perform extraordinary feats to sustain and save the human race from evil that are out to kill and destroy human race and human civilization. Each of these heroes outlived his time because the book, play, or legend of his origin had a message to tell, a message that repeated generations found interesting enough not to let the character perish with time. The stories of these extraordinary feats make their way into the lore of culture and form a crucial part of the storytelling. Therefore, a hero, as Fingeroth defines, I quote, "embodies what we believe is best in ourselves. A hero is a standard to aspire to, as well as an individual to be admired. This is true for those we deem heroes in the world around us, and it is true, but in different ways, for the fictional heroes we encounter in prose, theatre, and on screens of various types and sizes." I close my quote. With the passage of time, these figures make their way into legends that define the myth of a particular culture, and in this evolution of the hero, a subset of the heroic character came to possess superhuman qualities as an essential part of what is popularly known as the superhero. The word superhero dates back to the year 1917, but the antecedents of its archetype is found in the folkloric myths and legends. Biblical and mythological heroes are clearly precursors of superheroes. Odysseus, Thor, Moses are individuals of courage, commitment, and noble ideals, flawed though they may be as individuals. It is not surprising that this term came to being in the modern age, an age where man questioned his very being. It was a century marked by the 2 world wars, a century where man did not find solace in structures that governed the human civilization. It was a time when, as Yeats wrote, "a time for the second coming." It was in these troubled times that the idea of the superhero found expression as a figure that would reinstate the good and bring order. The 1903 play The Scarlet Pimpernel and its spin-offs popularized the idea of a masked avenger and the superhero trope of a secret identity. Shortly afterwards, masked and costumed pulp fiction characters such as Zorro in 1919 by Johnston, McCulley, and comic strip heroes such as Phantom in 1936 began appearing, as did non-costume characters with super strength, including the comic strip character Popeye in 1929. These trends came together in super-powered costumed heroes such as Ogon Bat in 1931, visualized in painted panels used by Kamishibai oral storytellers in Japan, and the first comic book superhero Superman in 1938 by Jerry Siegel. Jerry Siegel recalled his teenage experience of creating his first version of Superman, succinctly described what it is that we find so compelling about these heroes of modern myth. That Siegel, in his official recounting of his own, I quote, creation myth, deliberately chose to reference Samson and Hercules, and this is no accident. In connecting his creation to universally known and respected, if not necessarily admired, heroes of religion and mythology, Siegel tells us it's no accident that Superman and the myriad heroes inspired by him are seen as godly figures, and Superman represents, I quote, the 20th century archetype of mankind. At its finest, he is courage and humanity, steadfastness and decency, responsibility and ethics. He is our longing for perfection, for wisdom and power used in the service of the human race. I close my quote. These superheroes always had and continue to have one goal: to defend society from all the evils that could destroy and ruin all that mankind has stood for. Nevertheless, it is also important to note that the picture of the superhero is also a product of the society. So somehow, the superhero, more than even the ordinary fictional hero, has to represent the values of the society that produces him. That means that what, say, Superman symbolizes changes over time. In the 1950s, he may have been hunting commies. In 1970s, he may have been clearing a framed peace activist against a corrupt judicial system. Either way, the hero does the right thing. Perhaps more importantly, he knows what the right thing is. As Richard Reynolds points out, I quote, superheroes are by and large not upholders of the letter of the law. They are not law enforcement agents employed by the state. The set of values they traditionally defend is summed up by the Superman tag of truth, justice, and the American way. Sometimes the last term has been interpreted in a narrowly nationalistic way, but far more often he has stood for the ideals enshrined in the US Constitution. I close my quote. The superhero is one because he extends the powers normally available to all human beings. He's just a degree higher, a little more intelligent, faster, heightened powers of imagination or sight. They possess what Eco terms as, I quote, extreme realization of human endowments. I close my quote. Superman is accepted because he resides amongst us and is one of us, and his everyday activities are for us, which make him a part of modern mythology and is an extension of what we might want to do. Now, what are the characteristics of a superhero? The first, most important characteristic is, of course, extraordinary powers and abilities. Superheroes are blessed with extraordinary powers and abilities. Some are born with it and cultivate it, while others acquire it through science and technology. Wolverine of X-Men fame is born with a mutation that allows him to heal at lightning speed, while his adamantium claws make him a force to reckon with, which is blessed by science. Batman is born an ordinary human being, but his resilience during his martial arts training and his expertise in forensic training is remarkable. All superheroes follow a strong moral code. With great power comes great responsibility. This sentence has almost become a cliche in our world. Superheroes have a strong sense of morality and moral code. They would risk their life for anybody in harm's way, at times even if it meant putting a loved one in danger. This moral code is also born out of motivation to do the right thing. Spider-Man has a strong sense of responsibility. Batman's personal vendetta against crime sets off a war against the drug lords of Gotham. Superman's sense of justice and humanitarian service lands him in sticky situations all the time. Almost all superheroes possess this sense of morality, a sense of what is good and what needs to be reinstated. The next, of course, most obvious thing is a secret identity. A secret identity is absolutely essential to keep the family or friends of superheroes safe from the villains of the series. Superman is an orphan, but Clark Kent is not. Therefore, it is crucial for him to keep his true identity hidden from all. Spider-Man keeps himself from revealing so that he may escape law and justice. Though in some superhero books, a few may know the true identity, but families or friends who know are sworn to secrecy. In order to keep the secret identity intact, a superhero imbibes an underlying motive or theme which defines his work or personal traits. Batman wears a bat-themed costume, uses bat-themed gadgetry and equipment, and operates at night. Spider-Man can shoot webs from his hands and has a spider web pattern on his costume and other spider-like abilities. And Phantom, true to his name, moves silently like a ghost. Villains. All of them fight villains. Their stories consist of enemies that they have to fight repeatedly. In some cases, superheroes begin by fighting run-of-the-mill criminals before supervillains surface in their respective storylines. In many cases, the hero is in part responsible for the appearance of these supervillains. The Scorpion was created as the perfect enemy to defeat Spider-Man, and characters in Batman's comics often accuse him of creating the villains he fights. Often superheroes have an arch-enemy who is especially threatening. The idea of the villains is a crucial part of superhero sagas, and they have changed and is evident in the kind of supervillains of superhero sagas across decades. In the Phantom series in 1940s, villains were mostly sea pirates. In Superman, took on the role of social activist, fighting crooked businessmen and politicians, and demolishing rundown tenements. In Spider-Man, the majority of these villains' powers originate with scientific advancements of technology, and in X-Men, they are mutants themselves. Each superhero has their own costume that helps make him or her recognizable to the general public. Costumes are often colorful to enhance the character's visual appeal and frequently incorporate the superhero's name and theme. Captain America's costume has an American flag. Spider-Man's costume has a spider. Batman's costume is designed like a bat. However, in the past few decades, the newer school of superheroes like the X-Men do not wear costumes, but blend into the crowd in garb and appearance. Devotion to justice always inevitably overrides devotion to law in the case of superheroes. Beginning from Robin Hood to Spider-Man to Superman, all of them have an overriding sense of justice and righteousness. At times, the state machinery seems to be corrupt, and all the superheroes recognize them and take necessary action. Batman, in order to avenge the death of his parents, overthrows the corrupt officials of Gotham City to restore and bring justice to the wronged. Superhero and the comic book. The idea of the superhero, as already established, has been drawn from the folklore of the people, folklore which extends back to religious faiths and beliefs. Stories of heroes and superheroes were and are meant for children and adults alike, but they are more enjoyed by children for many reasons. Stories have been adapted into pictures and told to children. This not only aids the understanding but also triggers the imagination. The comic book, therefore, has been, before the advent of television and internet, arguably the most popular form of entertainment for children. The comic book is an integral part of public visual culture because it is used for instruction as well as entertainment. Like other forms of public culture, they serve numerous other functions. As Thomas Inge points out, comics must be seen as a form of communication because they can be made to serve various purposes, including propaganda and social causes, and for raising social awareness. For instance, Spider-Man raised awareness against drugs and drug abuse, drug trafficking, organized crime, pollution, racism, particularly in the late 1960s and 1970s. The Superman comic book was shipped in hundreds and thousands to American soldiers around the world to raise their morale, though Superman himself never went to war. Perhaps the most popular genre in the comic book is the superhero comic book. As Pramod Nair writes, I quote, "Comic books of this type are characterized as adventure strips because the storyline often involves a heroic adversity theme. In fact, superheroes such as Superman, Batman, Spider-Man are pervasive as 20th century icons." I close my quote. Therefore, it becomes essential to examine the comic book and its relation to the idea of the superhero that it produces for the consumption of children. Marvel Comics was started by publisher Martin Goodman, and it had its origins in the pulp era of the 1930s. Goodman, who published Western and detective pulps, also published a series of pulp magazines, including Marvel Science Stories and Marvel Tales. Marvel was originally called Timely Comics, and the very first comic book with the name Marvel in its title, Marvel Comics number 1, was published by Timely in 1939. Marvel Comics, as we know it today, did not start until the first issue of the Fantastic Four, published in 1961. Both Stan Lee, born Stanley Martin Lieber, and Jack the King Kirby, born Jacob Kurtzberg, who created many of the characters in the current Marvel Universe, including the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and the Hulk, had worked for Timely. Other early Timely characters that transcended the gap and became part of the current Marvel Universe includes Captain America, Human Torch, Quasar, and the Submariner. As Robert Weiner muses, in his essay Spidey and Me, Lee says that the original Spider-Man comic was one of the first superhero comic books whose vocabulary was pitched to a college-level readership. He argues that he has never written down to our audience or tried to simplify the wordage because it is just a comic. Neither were the characters always teenagers. For example, in the second Spider-Man issue, Spider-Man's nemesis, the Vulture, is a senior citizen, and Reed Richards and Professor X are middle-aged. This mindset resulted in children, teenage, college students, and adults all enjoying comics. During the golden age of comics in the 1970s, the readership of these comics ranged from teenagers to people in their mid-70s who were simply addicted to these picture books. The ideological context and the historical moments in which these books and characters are embedded cannot be overlooked. An ideological myth informs the superhero, according to Reynolds, who says, I quote again, that the normal and everyday enshrines positive values that must be defended through heroic action and defended over and over again, almost without respite against an endless battery of menaces determined to remake the world, the normal is valuable and is constantly under attack, which means that almost by definition, the superhero is battling on behalf of the status quo. Into this heroic matrix, one can insert representatives of any race or creed imaginable. But in order to be functioning superheroes, they will need to conform to the ideological rules of the game. The superhero has a mission to preserve society, not to reinvent it. The key word is preserve. I repeat, is preserve, which is the duty of the superhero, whereas the villain of the comic is out to destroy or challenge the order. Marvel Comics, through the characters, were trying to preserve the social order by portraying superheroes that were facing the day-to-day challenges that the milieu was throwing at them. Superman is an alien, but despite being an alien, he saves humanity every day. The notion of family is extended by Superman to include the whole human race. As Nair writes that, I quote, Superman represents the assimilationist rhetoric of America towards its immigrants. To be in America is to adopt American values. Superman, created during the most traumatic years of American history, the post-depression of 1930s, became the embodiment of American values. Amar Chitrakatha and the Indian superhero. The earliest form of an indigenized comic book was in the form of ACK or Amar Chitrakatha, loosely translated as Immortal Picture Stories. It called for a re-engagement with tradition and an attempt to rebuild a sense of confidence and pride through a backward glance at rich and glorious past, reasserting itself for this demand. Anant Pai attempts to refashion history by showing the heroism and charisma of great men, a few women, including saints, particularly crucial because of his target audience and intention. Another crucial point that needs to be kept in mind while talking about Amar Chitrakatha is its target audience. The idea of the superhero in India is taken over by figures from Hinduism and from history, particularly medieval saints and national heroes. The stated intention of the series is described on the home page. The most common and easy way to propagate values to the young is through biography, particularly hagiography, through idolization and idealization. Idolization here means worshipping an individual as an idol, which means that the individual being discussed ceases to be an inidentifiable mortal and is venerated as a god. This process of idolization of saints, in this case medieval saints, alters the way they are received and assimilated by young minds. It is almost as if these picture books wants their readers to stop being followers and turn into worshippers. For example, if we look at the front cover page of Kabir, we see that the first glance the image seems to be that of Lord Krishna. In this pictorial textual representation of these life stories, the birth and death of these idols is more often than not shrouded in mystery. In the series on Kabir, he was just found by his weaver, parents alongside a pond. Therefore, his blood lineage is not known. If there is no mystery about the birth of these figures, there is definitely a prediction about the child growing up to be a great human being, which is seen in the case of Chaitanya and similarly in Kabir too. Miracles further add to the process of idolization. Miracles are part of a saint's identity and interaction with the people. Even in the Christian tradition, sainthood is only bestowed or conferred on those figures alone that perform a certain number of miracles. In fact, these miraculous happenings are debated upon during the process of canonization of Christian saints. Though the process of recognizing saints in India is not as stringent as in the West, miracles are nevertheless included. There are numerous examples about saints and attaining sainthood. In Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and in Shankardev, we find pictorial representations of them playing or interacting with poisonous snakes without getting hurt, implying that these asps did not hurt them because they were godly. The representation of Shankardev being shielded by the hooded serpent is almost reminiscent of Anant Nag, shielding Lord Vishnu or his avatar Lord Krishna. Idealization is another crucial aspect of picture books that takes place through the language and pictures in these books. There are numerous illustrations in this module that will help the reader and the watcher try and understand what idealization and idolization is. Idealization means raising these figures to people of excellence without any blemish. Saints, as we know them, in our tradition, were actually teachers who were well-read and who thought about their social and political lives and tried to raise themselves over times of trouble. They taught and preached about life as they thought about it and the way they lived their lives. Kindness towards fellow beings and animals alike, renunciation of worldly pleasures, of non-violence even at the cost of eternal suffering, are some of the ideals by which they lived their lives. These ideals are beautifully portrayed in the picture books for children, especially in Amar Chitra Katha. The fact that these routine encounters generated such anxiety and bewilderment demonstrates the extent to which it is taken for granted objects, practices, or symbols that remain paramount in generating a sense of confidence in one's own surroundings and relation with others. Conclusion. Superheroes have traversed through time and space to be and mean what they mean today. They find roots in religion, faiths, and folklore of a particular culture. They find their predecessors in characters, particularly gods and demigods like Hercules and Prometheus, in Krishna and in Ram, and continue to imbue our lives in the form of characters like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Phantom, and the famous X-Men. But as illustrated, it would be unwise to write them down or brush their importance under the carpet by just calling them entertainment. Superhero comics have entertained more than a generation and continue to do so. But at the same time, in their telling or their retelling, they have also informed us about the ways in which these comics have almost shaped the way an entire generation thought and acted. By understanding and acknowledging this fact, it is a responsibility to pass on to our children a more, if possible, responsible, globalized, and an undeterred superhero. Thank you. This brings us to the conclusion of the module on the superhero.